Today I want to unpack the political platform of Paloma Valencia. She's been selected as the candidate for the Centro Democrático party, which is the Uribistas, or the party that is led by former President and Senator Alvaro Uribe. And I want to talk about this because by her being selected by that major party, she's going to already be one of the main contenders. I hope to do the same thing with every leading presidential candidate, and we also hope to talk to them. What's happened is that the deadline for petitions to be submitted if you want to be a presidential candidate, that has passed, and several candidates have submitted their stacks of petitions. And so now the CNE, the Centro Nacional Electoral, which is the committee, which is the agency that it's like the Federal Elections Commission in the U.S. Actually, that's different because the Federal Elections Commission is more of a regulatory commission. But in the U.S., the states generally control candidate registration. But anyway, what's happened is that as we wait and see whose petitions are validated and who is officially a candidate, we want to reach out to those candidates and to those campaigns and give everyone a fair shot of getting their message out. Obviously, they're focused on Colombians in Colombia, but it also is important, I think, for them, and hopefully they agree, to really communicate with the rest of the world what they are about and why they want to be president and what they would do if they're president. So we'll start with Paloma Valencia. So, and a lot of this is based on an interview that we'll share with you. She did with one of the domestic media outlets. And so she's come out and said that when it comes to economic policy and fiscal austerity, she wants to reduce the number of government ministries from 19 to 12 and cut bureaucratic spending. And there is a lot of that in Colombia. She wants to save about 37 trillion pesos by streamlining government entities and reducing payrolls and oversight bodies like the Contraloría and the Procuraduría, which is the financial office, the controller's office. So basically for the government, they look at financial flows within the government budget to make sure that the government budget is being spent properly. And the Procuraduría, which is the government kind of it's like there's an attorney general for the public and there's an attorney general for government figures. And she wants to reduce the budgets or the payrolls in those organizations. I think that oversight's necessary. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad idea to reduce payrolls, but those organizations definitely need to be supported because those are some of your primary independent anti-corruption entities in Colombia, and I would hate to see those gutted, me speaking from my own personal opinion. Tax reform, she wants to lower the corporate income tax rate to promote competitiveness. But she says that she doesn't want to do that at the beginning. She wants to get in there and get her government up and running because she doesn't want to cause a lot of fiscal chaos, and also create like a mini regime or a simplified regime for informal workers so that they can simplify their tax and administrative requirements. Right now, they don't really, in most cases, the informal workers don't even pay tax other than what they might pay as IVA, which is like the VAT or the sales tax. But she hopes to bring more small and lower income workers into the tax contribution regime by creating a simplified and a simplified tax regime for them that also has a low burden both administratively as well as kind of how much you have to pay, I guess. With her plan Colombia that she talks about, she wants to use high-tech tools like drones and facial recognition and then precision armaments as well to combat criminality and and when she says criminality in this case, we're talking about the Clan del Golfo, the Gulf Clan or the ELN or the FARC dissidents and people like that without risking the lives of troops. So she wants to better protect the soldiers, and she also wants aggressive punishment of crime, and that's to say to pursue the assets. And this is interesting because this is actually completely the opposite approach that De La Espriella has taken, because and remember, he's a defense attorney who has represented a lot of Colombian criminals, but he actually has come out and said that he wants to give them kind of a financial amnesty, and for them to pay a criminal tax and serve a few years, 3 years in prison, and then let them off. So he actually has a criminal friendly proposal, whereas Paloma Valencia is saying that she wants to crack down on criminals. It's going to be interesting to see. I can't wait to see how the different political candidates handle Espriella's record as Abelardo de Espriella who's one of the candidates for president. He's an outsider. He has not been a political actor before, but he's running kind of as a right-wing populist, and he's talking about back to family and the church, and he was not a religious person. Now, if this sounds familiar, then don't blame me. But he all of a sudden comes out. He was not a religious guy. He has his own brand of rum. He has his own brand of clothing. He was some kind of musical singer. But now that he's running for president, he's talking about God and family and the church and back to moral values and all these kinds of things. So I don't know if that sounds like anybody, but if it does, you can, if it does, tell me who in the comments. But anyway, that's a different approach that she wants to take. And she also calls for restoring strong military and diplomatic ties and technical cooperation with the United States, and also reestablishing the relations with Israel that Petro broke. Petro has been very much anti-Israel, pro-Palestine, and I'm not using the right words here, because I guess pro-Hamas is a better word, because you can be both pro-Palestine and pro-Israel. But he's been a very active Hamas sympathizer, I think it would be fair to say. But and she, as far as I know, maybe she has, maybe she hasn't. I haven't heard her say anything about Hamas. I haven't been listening, so I'm not saying that those statements don't exist. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But she actually wants to restore those diplomatic relationships. If you search and finance Colombia, you'll see that Colombia and Israel has signed several defense contracts where Colombia was going to purchase armaments from Israel. Colombia already has obsolete Israeli jet fighters, the Kafir fighters, and also had signed an agreement for some really impressive anti-aircraft missile systems. But those, I believe, fell apart when the diplomatic relationships between Israel and Colombia fell apart. So when it comes to energy, she has said she is a pro-green energy person. She wants to expand wind power up in La Guajira, also solar, geothermal, and hydroelectric projects. Colombia right now gets more than 70% of its electricity from hydroelectric projects, and it's been that's a form of green energy. You can't deny that. You can with everything you have environmental considerations and things like that, but Colombia is and the geography and the topography actually allows for that. So she actually wants to encourage those. She wants to use artificial intelligence, according to her, to attract nearshoring, which is really good for for our BPO friends and outsourcing and shared services and things like that, because she wants to increase the human capacity so that the qualified talent is here to use things like AI, because as much AI as we're going to get, we still need humans to operate it, to manage it, to direct it. And she wants Colombians to be, according to her, I'm not giving her an endorsement or anything like that, I'm just giving an analysis, but that's what she's saying that she wants to do. She also wants to, interestingly enough, incorporate AI into Colombia's judicial system. I don't know what that means. I'm not a lawyer. I think she might be a lawyer. I don't know, but she wants to use AI, according to her, to speed up legal processes and also to ensure how laws are enforced effectively. Of course, you could have a whole conversation on that, and a whole debate on how that is done. But it's interesting. That's part of her policy. And when it comes to even with education, she says she wants to have an AI tutor for every child in the public school system, and to personalize learning, reading and writing and mathematics. That's great in concept, but it reminds me of something. I got to visit, and I did it with the local leader from the YU indigenous community. So I got to go up to La Guajira. La Guajira is a Colombian department, which is like a province or state, up near the Venezuelan border. It's on the Atlantic Ocean, on the Caribbean coast. Most of it is desert. If you're in Santa Marta, Colombia, and you continue to go northeast along the coast, you're going to end up in La Guajira. But I saw some things. I got to visit some schoolhouses with children, and it was kind of cool. You would think we were Martians from the planet Zork or something like that, because they weren't used to getting visitors from another country, let alone even from another part of Colombia, because that part of the country is beautiful, but it's largely forgotten when it comes to investment in things like education and infrastructure. And I visited these schools, and these children want to learn, and there are teachers from the YU community who want to teach. But you talk about internet, and you talk about AI tutors, which could be a great idea. They didn't even have cell phone coverage. They had electricity from a generator or something like that. They had no communication. There were no phone lines. There was no cell service. And if you remember, during the Ivan Duque administration, I'm not saying that it was his fault or anything like that, but there was a contract to Centros Poblados, is what it was called, that they were going to bring internet to all of these remote areas. And some jackasses won the contract under false pretenses and then ran off with the deposit. They ran off with the multi-million deposit and went and bought luxury trucks and condominiums in Miami. Now they're caught now and they're in jail now, but the project collapsed and it never got done because of that type of unfathomable greed. I guess it's not unfathomable because you see it. You see it in things like that. You see it in so many other different programs. In the current administration of Gustavo Petro, there is the UNGRD schedule. The UNGRD is a government agency. It's basically the disaster relief agency. So if there's a earthquake or flood or something like that, they're like FEMA in the United States. They're the ones who come in and are supposed to fix stuff or coordinate all of that stuff like that. And what they had done was people in the current administration were inflating the contract. They'd go out and buy these trucks. And so if the truck was, let's say, $80,000, they wrote the contract for $160,000 so that they could then take the extra $80,000. So they would overcharge the government for the trucks. Now, the dealer where they bought the trucks didn't even know any of this. These political hacks created a shell company, and they used the shell company to purchase the trucks, and then the shell company then sold the trucks to the government at this inflated price, and then they took the money for that in suitcases and used it to pay political bribes to try to get Petro's legislation passed. Now, so far nobody's besmirched Petro in all of this, but these were his functionaries trying to get his legislation passed. So you can do with that what you will. But again, they were buying water trucks because there was a drought last year. It'll be a couple years ago by the time you hear this, because I'm recording this in 2025, and this stuff all jumped off last year, and there was a drought at the beginning of 2024, and they were buying. So these trucks were water tanker trucks to bring drinkable water, potable water to these remote areas in La Guajira, where the poorest of the poor in Colombia are in these remote places like that. And the trucks, they actually got delivered to the government, but nobody ever used them to deliver water to La Guajira. So they just took the money from it to go and bribe politicians to get their gravy bills passed or whatever the case might be. So again, we see things like this, and who suffers? It's like the Hunger Games. So like Bogota and Medellin are like District 1 and District 2 where everything's nice. But then you have District 7 out there where maybe the military will come out there, and rumble around or something like that. But nobody gets the benefit of living in an OECD country. The OECD is supposed to be like the most advanced, economically advanced countries, but we still have areas out there where there's no communications, let alone internet. So, and I'm sorry because I've kind of gone off on this personal opinion, but it touched me to do so when I hear, and I'm not criticizing her idea. I'm not criticizing Paloma Valencia's idea at all. It may be a great idea. But when I think about the execution, before every child in the public school system in Colombia can have an AI tutor, they need internet. They need mobile service or wireless service or telephone service. Because if you can't get on the internet, if you don't have a computer, you ain't getting AI. Okay? So I hope that if they do this, it's not just for people on the north side of Bogota or the south side of Medellin or the coastal neighborhoods in Cartagena like Boca Grande and Manga and the places that are halfway nice. But I hope that they remember these kids out there in La Guajira. And I hope that they remember the kids over in Chocó and in places like Ciénaga on the Atlantic coast between Santa Marta and Barranquilla. And so many other areas down in the Amazonas regions and down there in Valpes and these types of areas like that along Popayan and the areas that in many ways are forgotten. Cauca, where there's no government presence, there's no security, and rebels have kind of overrun everything. Or rebels, I say rebels, they're mafias. Or Cucuta, or Norte de Santander on the Venezuelan border, which is basically a lawless no-go zone where if you go up there right now, you're likely to get kidnapped or worse. So I hope that they can bring security into these places so that people don't have to worry about their children being abducted and made into child soldiers, which still happens. The FARC dissidents are doing that. The ELN does that. And I hope that they can get the connectivity that they need and the electricity that they need so that they can have this AI tutor. So I'm sorry for going off. And it's not against, I know that the subject of this is on Paloma Valencia, and this is in no way against anything that she's done or anything that she said. But when we talk about the proposal to have an AI tutor for every child, which is a noble idea, there are some things that have to happen in Colombia first. She wants to have a two-headed pension system where the state matches every peso saved by informal workers. That's kind of a cool idea. It's like if we have a 401k in the U.S. and your employer matches, or like Chile has, I believe, a contributory system as well that has a good reputation. But even if you have, like if you're in Colombia, if you're in the formal workplace, there is an employer contribution. But if you're informal, you're running, doing deliveries for the corner grocery store or something like that, or working in the corner grocery store in some small town where they're paying you in cash, and nobody from the Department of the Labor Ministry is going to come out there and do anything about that. Then that sounds like a way where people who are self-employed or there's a guy that drives around outside of here and he's selling mazamorra, which is a corn beverage. It's not like pulque in Mexico or anything like that. It's not alcoholic. It's almost like a breakfast gruel that you would drink. And it's like a milky corn-based thing. And this guy has this little cart. And you hear him once a week, and he has this little bicycle with this box on the front and a loudspeaker. And he comes by and he goes, mazamorra, mazamorra. And the dogs all start barking and everything like that. But that's an example of an informal worker that if he made any money, he could squirrel a little bit away that the government would then match, and that would be a great incentive to savings. Also, Paloma Valencia is suggesting a pension fund so that every child born in poverty, so let's say what they currently call estrato uno, maybe estrato dos, is seated with $1 million by the state at birth. That's not a lot of money. That's about, between just under $300. And but if they did that and then that child was not able to go and spend the money, or the parents couldn't get at it, that's great. That person then is going to have some money based on compound interest, and depends on how. And again, there's the devil's in the detail. It depends on how that money is invested. These kinds of things like that. That could be really good. So she's proposing that kind of pension where at birth you get that. I remember when I was born, I don't remember when I was born, but one of the guys, my dad was in broadcast, and there was a place called Lee's Style Shop, and Lee's was in an urban neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. And my dad worked at the radio station. He was a program director, but it was a small station, and so in small businesses you do kind of a little bit of everything. In a big corporate radio station, you'll have the sales execs who do that, and then the on-air talent or the announcers or the DJs would do that, and then some other people are in management, and some engineers are doing. Actually, back in those days, you had to have a broadcast license, and you had to know technical stuff to be a DJ on the air back then. But anyway, the guy who owned, I forget his name now, but the guy who owned Lee's Style Shop opened a savings account for me in 1968, and he put $20 in it, and it was a passbook savings account, and that was his gift when I was born. And I remember when I was a little kid, I'd go by Lee's, and Lee's was kind of a place where they sold, I call them pimp clothes, because they weren't. They were like, if you go and look at the fashions of the 60s or 70s, and if you look at what those old time pimps and people who were cool dudes back then would look like, and they had these big collars and things like that. And you could tell they weren't business people, they weren't businessmen, and back then it was mostly men. Because they weren't like you could tell, they were like, there was a suit that people wore to a real office, like if you're a stockbroker or a lawyer. And then there were these suits that people would wear to like the club or the disco or to church. There's these, suits that I'd see, and it's like, those people don't work in an office. I remember thinking I'd see people in church when I was a kid, because they'd have like these shiny suits with these kind of bright colors and interesting fabrics and things like that. And even then as a kid, I could kind of tell the difference. But Lee's was the place to go to buy these duds or to buy these kind of clothes back then. But anyway, I never really was a customer of his store, but I was thankful for that, and I ended up using that money for college. It wasn't like a whole lot of money or anything like that, but I remember that because it was that same kind of idea. Open a pension fund or open a savings account for somebody when they're born, and then hopefully those returns can contribute to their retirement or buying a house or whatever the case might be. Now, when it comes to the environment, she wants to actually increase the environmental sector's royalties. Royalties, regalias in Spanish, are the money that let's say you're a mining company and you have a gold mine. Then you get so much gold out the ground, and so for however much gold you extract, then you have to pay the government a certain amount of that. So what she wants to do is to move so that money goes to the government, and the government uses it for whatever it's going to use it for, general budget, things like that. When she says to increase the environmental sector's share of royalties from 5% to 20%, she's saying, I believe, because we're going off of what she's said verbally and don't have any policy documents yet, that she wants to make sure that 20% of that money goes towards environmental initiatives rather than the current 5% that's guaranteed now. It's not raising the royalties or quadrupling the royalties or anything like that. And she wants to use that to have military protection for the Amazon, and also to pay the communities in the Amazon to help protect, which is a good idea because for the most part, that area, there's not a lot of income, and the people who live there are very low income, on the low income segment of the Colombian population. And that area does need military protection because just like what's happening in Brazil, there's a lot of deforestation. The difference in Colombia, it's not necessarily state supported, and I'm not saying that it is anymore in Brazil, though it seems to have been under the previous Brazilian administration. There's a lot of deforestation for everything from illegal capture of land for cattle grazing. That's to say we're going to chop down the jungle so we can have cows graze. There's also illegal timber cutting. There's a lot of exotic woods. There's some beautiful woods down here that are just amazing. And people will chop them down and float them down the rivers and somehow get them out of the country. And that's a big piece of contraband. It's one thing when people are sneaking out narcotics or something like that, but people are sneaking out whole logs and tree trunks out of the country somehow. But anyway, the Amazon does need protection, and it's glad to see to hear that she has some ideas for that. Efficiency when it comes to licensing using AI to map ecosystems. Again, she seems to be really big on AI, and a lot of this stuff I think might be conceptual, and it may or may not be practical when it comes to working it out, but this is an idea, and she wants to allow for faster environmental licensing while maintaining strict conservation standards, she says. Now, so what happens in Colombia is if I say, hey, I want to build a gold mine or I want to drill for natural gas right here or something like that, they've got to go through a licensing process to figure out what the environmental impact is going to be and to make sure that there are limits and things like that, and to say, hey, if there's going to be damage, is it within an acceptable minimum? And if it is, what are the mitigation steps that you are going to take to make sure that your activity is a net positive for the environment? Colombia is pretty good about having these types of things. And so she wants to use AI. I don't know. I think drones might be better for things like that and using geolocation technologies and things, but she has an idea maybe for AI. And either she's really advanced and has, and is ahead of the game when it comes to AI and the ways that AI can be deployed and used, or she is on the other end of the scale and needs to be educated and is saying like AI is, without understanding the practical limitations of it. I don't know which side of the spectrum she's on, but that's what she wants to do. She also wants to have she also wants a decentralized government. This is something close to my heart as a someone who leans libertarian, but she wants to kind of give more power to local cities. Now you have your big cities like Bogota, Medellin, Cali, Cartagena, Barranquilla, Bucaramanga, you could say, but then you have a lot of small cities in Colombia that have more than 150,000 inhabitants, which is pretty big, but are not part of that top tier of cities. I would guess Ibagué would fall into something like that, in Tolima, or even Rio Negro outside of Medellin probably has. I would guess Rio Negro has more than 150,000 people. You have other areas as well. Santa Marta might fall into that range. Monteria, for example, Sincelejo. But to allow those cities to have more control over their budgets and over their initiatives and what they're able to do to reduce the cost of living and improve the quality of life. So that, again, that's one of those things where it's easy to say, the devil's in the details. How are you going to do that? You're talking about sort of the end result. Okay, so if the end result would be these cities becoming more empowered, how are you going to do that? What does that mean? Just throwing money at them? What constraints and restrictions will be in place? What legislative structure? And if you're going to do this, you better have the Contraloria and the Procuraduria strong, because they're going to need to oversee this money. Because one of the things that happens in a lot of places, not just Colombia, is that local politicians tend to run off with bags of money. You see a lot of that. And so, sure, go ahead and decentralize government, but make sure that the checks and balances, the Contraloria and the Procuraduria, are in place to supervise and to oversee the good governance of those local officials who you have empowered. Now, with Venezuela, she wants to see Venezuela rebuilt as a strong neighbor, as a safe neighbor, as a cooperative neighbor, as a primary trading partner. Venezuela, there was a time when Venezuela was the rich, safe country, and Colombians were refugees who went to Venezuela. But now it's kind of, back because it was dangerous here in the 80s and 90s. But now it's been reversed. And so she hopes to see Venezuela return to its status as a major economy, a major Latin American economy, and believes that there could be $15 billion in dollars in trade between Venezuela and Colombia, which would be great for both countries. She does not believe in the Petro administration's Paz Total policy, which he promised when he ran for president, and guaranteed total peace, and he did. And he was going to give these rebel groups a good talking to, and they were going to lay down their arms and pick up daisies and sing Kumbaya and all this kind of stuff like that, but they've made a mockery of him. There's more narcotics production than at any time during the old Pablo Escobar days. These groups have grown in strength. They are back to taking over geographic control of areas in Colombia, like in Cauca. Cauca is the department south of Cali. So Cali is in a state or department called Valle de Cauca. It's named after the Cauca River, which goes from the mountains south of Cali, and it runs all the way up past west of Medellin over in Santa Fe de Antioquia. It runs through by Cali, and then it goes up and eventually empties into the Magdalena River on the northern coastal plains of Colombia. But Cali is in Valle de Cauca. That's the state. And south of that is Cauca, just Cauca. And kind of like how you have Virginia and West Virginia, right? So Cauca is a dangerous no-go zone now because these armed groups, these armed mafia groups have taken over. The president has failed at reducing the violence. The violence has actually grown. That area has become unsafe. The area in Norte de Santander, which again, you have Department Santander, which is where Bucaramanga is, and San Gil and some nice tourist areas and things like that. This is on the other side of the country. And then you have another department, which is on the Venezuela border this is where Cucuta is, called Norte de Santander. Again, that area has become extremely dangerous, especially close to the border, where you have Catatumbo, for example, and this is an area where it's just not safe to go. Let alone if you're a foreigner. It's not safe to go if you're a Colombian and not like a local, maybe a local small holder of a let's say a small farm or something like that. Even they face danger because of extortion, things like that. They're stealing your children to make them child soldiers and all of these different things. So the government promised total peace, and we have more like total chaos in certain areas. And she believes that the notion that you're going to get these rebel mafia groups to stop doing crime by talking to them and giving them hugs or whatever the current president thought, is not working, and she wants to basically eliminate them. So the current administration, she says that they do things in the cities like and Petro did this when he was the mayor of Bogota, and I lived in Bogota at the time, actually. This was around the time I got the idea to launch FinanceColombia.com, the only English language business publication focused on Colombia. He had this idea that he was going to pay the little kid street punk gangs, he's going to pay them not to kill people. He's going to pay them not to do crime. And that was his idea. And so he took the same approach from when he was mayor to when he became president. And it didn't work back then, and it's not working now. So she wants to get rid of that, and she says the way that you deal with criminals is you lock them up if they're lucky, or you eliminate them These are my words, not hers. I'm just talking about her approach. And so that is part of her platform. And she also wants to bring back the cooperation of the United States that, and the countries have cooperated when it comes to defense, both in international, on the international arena, like everything from the UN to multinational forces to things like that. A lot of people don't know this, but Colombia was a participant in the Korean War. And so you have Colombian Korean War veterans who, of course, fought alongside with the Americans and the UN forces, or whatever you want to, however you want to look at it. But Colombians actually did fight in that officially. Now you have Colombians unofficially fighting as mercenaries over there in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I believe some have been allegedly involved in the South Sudan conflict. And this isn't any government policy or anything like that. These are people just on their own account. Like, I'm going to fly off somewhere and sign up to fight in your war. I'm going to respond to your ad and Soldier of Fortune or whatever. Like you saw, those guys got caught up there in Haiti a couple years back. Just put Haiti, the word in Finance Colombia, and you'll see the coverage that we gave on that. I talked to one soldier who was in the Colombian military, and he was about to retire, and he said, hey, maybe I ought to go and do this. It'll be a good idea. And I just, on a personal level, told him, dude, don't do that. Don't do that. Not even from a standpoint of like right or wrong, even though that's should be the primary factor. But you don't know what you're getting into. Not only is it not your fight, and you don't even understand who the bad guys are, but once you get over there, you have no rights. There's nobody looking out for you. You get abused or something like that, you're in some unit or somebody is like, hey, we're going to make you cannon fodder. And you're like, this isn't right. There's nobody. You can't call like your government. Like if you go to a place, hey, we're going to have NATO troops. And so the U.S. troops are going to go and the Canadian troops are going to go. And if the Canadian guy treats the U.S. guy like a jerk or something like that, there are chains of command that you can go and talk to, like your own commanders or people like that. But once you go over there, you're basically a nobody. And luckily he didn't go. And now he's happily retired from the Colombian military and having a nice time. So anyway, that is our analysis on the platform of Paloma Valencia, and we will continue to monitor the presidential campaigns. And we also, there's nothing special about her, like we're for her or against her or anything like that. It's just she's one of the first ones to come out with one, and we hope to do this for all of the major candidates as well and keep you informed. So be sure to like and subscribe so that we can keep you informed. But more importantly, don't trust the algorithm. And what I mean by that is somebody like Petro or Trump or Xi Jinping or whoever might get pissed off with us or annoyed with us and have us deplatformed. I've seen it happen. And actually it's happened to us in the past for other reasons, not necessarily, I don't think anything political or anything that we said, but AI probably just, we got flagged that there was something wrong with their platform and there wasn't, and it got taken down, and it took me about 5 months of frustration to get it back. I couldn't even reach, it was with Facebook, and I couldn't even reach anybody at Facebook or Meta. And eventually we got our platform back. But when I say don't trust the platform, don't trust the algorithm, what I mean is subscribe to us so that we can, no matter what happens, communicate to our email list. We send out a news bulletin once a week at Finance Colombia, and you can go to financecolombia.com, but you can also just go to, we make it easy, go to fcsubscribe.com. That's fcsubscribe.com, and you'll see a sign-up form. I personally promise that we will never share your email address. We've been doing this for over a decade. Newer here to podcasts and things like that, but Finance Colombia, the publication, has been around now for over a decade, and we continue to keep going, but with more multimedia content, because you, the listener, the viewer, has demanded it, and so we're going to to comply. But please subscribe so that no matter what happens, we can stay in touch. We'll never spam you. We'll never share your email address with anyone else. And you can always unsubscribe when it's convenient for you. Thanks a lot. Again, like and subscribe, and we'll stay in touch.